Hello again, and welcome back to Illegally Cited. This is Jesse, aka BGFH, and I am back for the start of another new series, doing something a little bit different on the channel once again. This time we're actually starting a new series called Access Unlocked. If you remember back probably a week or so ago, a week or two ago, I put out a call on Twitter for suggestions, that I was trying to think of a name for a new type of video series I was thinking of starting, and I gave a brief description of what I was thinking about attempting. And I thought about it a while. Had no responses, interestingly, but I thought about it for a little while, and eventually just, hey, you know what? That's simple enough. That'll work. Access unlocked. So what I'm hoping to do with this series is we're actually to start with. If you have followed the channel for a while, you may recognize the game that we're looking at here, because I have done an iOS Low Vision Spotlight for it before. We are looking at the game Threes. But the reason that we are looking at this game again is, I've been paying a lot more attention to accessibility, of course. Especially after, I've always kind of had that in the back of my mind, but especially, after starting this channel, doing these low vision spotlights, and then branching into more accessible games, hardware reviews, just, thinking about accessibility in general, be it, for a game or VR or just some technology product, whatever. And I've had this sort of idea in my head for a while now, quite a while actually, but I just really didn't know if or how or what I was actually going to do with the idea. And, with all this stuff that's been going on in the game accessibility area the last year or two, and, I've kind of gotten a little bit more motivation and a little bit more inspiration to try this out and see what happens, with GA Conf and CSUN and GDC and all these accessibility talks and all this kind of cool stuff. So I thought, you know what, let's try the start of another series here. So what Access Unlocked is going to be, I've been asked a lot on the channel, why do I cover so many mainstream games? Could I cover more blind accessible games, games that are accessible for somebody with no vision whatsoever? And my answer to that always is, I would love to do a bit more of that, but I want to space them out a lot more because, there are just so many more mainstream. Literally, there are probably dozens of, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, there are literally probably dozens of games for mainstream audiences that come out these days on various platforms, compared to the, very small trickle of blind accessible titles. So, by comparison, sure, I'm going to cover a lot more mainstream games because there's just so many more of them, and I can see well enough to play a good chunk of them. So, but, like I said, especially doing these low vision spotlights and things, or just playing a game, there's been quite a few cases where, I'm playing this mainstream game, and I'm thinking to myself, this would actually be really easy. Well, conceptually, because if I was actually a halfway decent programmer, I wouldn't be making this video. I would instead be making an accessible version of this game. But as I usually tell people, I've taken programming classes in college, quite a few of them, and basically what I've learned in college is that I always tell people the main thing that I learned in programming classes is that I suck at programming. So that's just not going to be a thing anytime soon. So rather than, since I'm not able to code this stuff, I figure let's, hopefully some programmers and game developers might be watching the channel, and if they get cued into this series that we're going to start here today, maybe they can run with the concepts that I think up here, and maybe some of these core games or concepts or mechanics could be made accessible into future titles. So the main purpose of this Access Unlocked series is I'm going to take either a game or a game genre or a game mechanic or, some key thing that I've played in a game that I think would be really interesting and not that difficult to make accessible to a totally blind user, a totally blind gamer. So that's why I brought up Threes. The reason I brought up Threes is because it is a mainstream game that came out, I don't know, 3 years ago or better now. I covered it way back on the channel. So if you want to this is not going to be a breakdown of how the game is played. I'll give a quick summary, but it's not going to be a huge demonstration of this is what Threes is. Instead, I want to look at, because this is a game, like I said, it came out several years ago. I still play this game at least a couple to a few times a week. Usually, this is one that I always come back to when I'm listening to an audiobook or a podcast on my phone and I just want to do something else, just tinkering around with it. I can turn all the sound effects off here. You see that I got my, the music is turned off, the sound effects are turned off, because it's just a really great game to play while I'm doing something else. Or maybe I'm watching TV or watching a movie, watching football and the 18 gazillion commercials per game. That's a great thing to play. So what I'm going to do is we're going to look at this game, and I think, like I said, I think this would be a really, conceptually, fairly straightforward concept to make accessible. So let's start a new game here. And I'll just play around with it a little bit here. So for those uninitiated, Threes is a tile-based game. You got a 4x4 grid of tiles. You have, when you start a game, you have a random assortment of tiles that have 1, 2s, or 3s in them. And then you have several other tiles in this grid that are also empty or blank. The goal is basically you want to slide the tiles one space at a time, up, down, left, or right. And the only two, when you start out with, you see the red, or the blue ones, and the red 2 tiles. Those are the only two that are different, that can be combined. So in the upper left-hand corner, you see I've got a 2 and then a 1 right below it. So if I flick up, that those 2 tiles now turn into a 3. Now, I've also moved all the other tiles up because I'm not, you have to look at the whole board as a whole, not just one concentrated on one block, but okay, if I make that, what else is it going to affect? So I move up again. Okay, I've made another 3. Once you get up to 3, then you're basically looking at doing everything by doubles. The only way that you can make numbers increase is you have to pair them up. 3 and 3 make 6, 6 and 6 make 12, 12 and 12 make 24, etc. And it goes all the way up to, I think the highest number I've actually unlocked, which is actually really hard to do, by the way, is a 768, I think. Because it goes 24, 48, 96, and then, yeah. So it just goes up from there. And I think the highest I've got is a couple of 748 or something like that? I don't remember. But 700 something. But anyway, so that's really just a very quick gist of how the game is played. Now, I know if you can't see the screen, it's not really going to make a whole lot of sense to you. But I'm just making a few moves here just to show the board off a little bit, make a few moves. And the way you lose is basically you get it so that there's no more valid moves. The board is completely filled up. When I swipe left and right, not only do I move the tiles that are on the board, but each move, let's say I swipe up, that means at least there'll be one tile that will come up from the bottom. If I swipe left, one tile will randomly come in from the right. If I swipe down, one tile will come randomly from the top. And you see in the middle there, I have a red tile right now. So at least it gives you a little bit of a hint to say, okay, if I'm planning things out, I would, I want to make it so that red can be useful. So I've got a blue on the right there. Let's swipe left. Okay, I can kind of make that work. So it came in from the right, not quite in line with how I wanted it, but I can make that work. So I'll slide down a couple times, slide to the right a couple times, boom, I've got that. Slide left, get rid of that. So I'm just, like I said, I've played this so much I can just instinctively, slide through. So that's the gist of how the game is played. How do we make this accessible? So basically you're moving one tile at a time, up, down, left, or right, and those are just one finger swipes. I think that could still work. I've tried this with VoiceOver. It does not work. Likely because it's made in some sort of other engine besides just core iOS, Cocoa or Swift or whatever it is they made this in. I have no idea what game engine or development environment they made this in, but they probably just didn't have the means, or the engine itself doesn't provide native accessibility, so it would have to be retrofitted on top. And I actually did contact this developer because, when I got hooked on this game, Threes came out and I just got super hooked on it, and I still, like I said, off and on play it today. But, shortly after it came out, I actually emailed them, and I did kind of map out what I'm going to tell you guys here, is that, hey, I'm low vision. I really, really enjoy playing this. I know, the iPhone is iPhone, iOS, iPad, whatever. This is a great platform for accessibility because of Apple's built-in VoiceOver. This could be actually made accessible fairly straightforward, assuming the engine isn't completely strange to work with. So, how would I make this accessible? You have your play area of 4x4 tiles. So what I would do is I would explore by touch, where I would be able to slide my finger around the screen, and I would be able to feel what is under my finger, under the grid. And I might also include the option similar to these the Match 3 games or some of these other word games, where if you're working in a grid, you're only hearing one thing at a time as a blind user, whereas a low vision gamer like myself, I can kind of just quickly eyeball the board in a couple of seconds and get a rough estimate of, okay, we got some 3s there, we got a couple 6s, we got, okay, yeah, so I can see like 2 or 3 moves like within like a second or two. A blind user isn't going to have that luxury. So I would also have, under settings, I would have an option to have grid announcements. So maybe I would, like you would say 1-1 or 1-2, 2-1, or A1, B1, A2, B2, whatever. However you want to do your grid labeling. But have that option, and then also have the choices for, do you want to have the horizontal first or the vertical first? So, so like the second column, first row, I could say, 2-1 or 1-2. It just depends on how you want to, what way you want to say that stuff first. And other games have had that, and it's worked pretty well. Or even have an option, so if somebody gets really familiar, it's only a 4x4 grid. So if somebody gets really good muscle memory and, knows the layout, they can turn that off as well. So explore by touch, slide your finger over. It would tell you what is under there. I would probably switch the swipe gesture to a multi-finger gesture, because if I'm exploring by touch and maybe I make too quickly of a movement, it might interpret that as a move, and I don't want that. Or maybe also I want to be able to also, instead of explore by touch, I would want to be able to, this would be a little bit different than a VoiceOver command, but I would actually have it implemented so I could swipe in any direction, up, down, left, or right, and that would read me the tiles So, I mean, I wish I could demonstrate this. Um, I can't demonstrate it in this game, of course, because it's not accessible. But if you go back and look at, like I said, some of the Match 3 games that I've covered fairly recently, those they don't use voiceover, but they use their own kind of accessibility. So I can, in that grid, I can swipe up, down, left, or right, and I can get in much easier spatial awareness of how the board is laid out. So then when I want to move up, down, left, or right, I want to move the grid, maybe have that be a multi-finger gesture, a 2 or 3 finger gesture. I would also maybe have a shortcut for, I could explore by touch, and if I know exactly where it is in the top middle of the screen, I could tap that and it would tell me what the upcoming tile is. So right now it is a blank white one, which in this case means a 3. Okay, that's a 1. I'm trying to make another one come up here that has, so these are all 3s. Maybe I just got to get bigger. A plain white tile means a 3, but if there's a white tile with a plus sign, it's not going to tell you the exact number, but you know that it's going to be something greater than a 3. So it, if you have, right now I've got all the way up to I've got a couple 24s, I've got a 48 on the board. So it could be anything up to what I've got on the board. And usually, so I'm trying to make it come out, but I guess I have to okay, so there we go. So it gives me a couple of options. It might be a 6, it might be a 12. And we don't know, but that's just the luck of the next draw, essentially. So I would also, in addition to explore by touch, maybe I would have like a multi-finger double, like a 2-finger tap or something, and that would be a gesture that could tell you what the next tile is going to be. So it might say 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or in this case, it could say 6 or 12, or 6, 12. That way, you'll get the idea of what is next. And really, there's not much else I don't think that really has to be done. As long as a blind person could identify either by flicking up, down, left, or right, or by explore by touch, as long as they were able to navigate and see what the different tiles are on the board, have a different gesture for moving, have an explore by touch or a separate gesture to read the upcoming tile, and then of course, making your menu items and options accessible either by swipes or by explore by touch, turning your music and sound effects on and off. Also, if you're going to have music, I would also recommend having a volume slider, not just an on and off, because you might want music, but if somebody is using voiceover or built-in speech to hear what's going on, they might want the music, but they want their speech to actually be a lot higher than the music. So that's another thing that I'd recommend. But really, aside from making the buttons labeled and then providing an accessible interface for the game, that's all that really this would require. Like I said, I basically laid out all of this information for the developers back when 3s came out. I linked them to the Apple accessibility area. I took quite a bit of time and literally laid out okay, for this gesture, I would recommend maybe doing it like this, or you could use this or this gesture, and that would work. Basically what I just did for you guys here. And sadly, if I remember correctly, I don't think I ever heard anything back, or if I did, it was kind of one of those, oh, that's interesting, maybe we'll consider that one day, which usually means, yeah, nice try, but Nah, probably not. You kind of learn to read between the lines when you get those sort of like, what do you call them? Like draft letters of like, we thank you for your interest. We will pass your information on to the appropriate department. I.e., we didn't read Jack, and we'll placate you with a reply that just says whatever. I don't remember which, if I got something like that or if I didn't get a reply at all. But either way, it hasn't been made accessible. Like I said, if I was a programmer myself, if I could, I think this would be a fairly straightforward adaptation to do. But I'm not a programmer, so unfortunately, I'm not able to do that. So conceptually, that's what I would recommend to make a game like this accessible. Like I said, it's a very simple concept. In theory, it takes like a couple seconds to learn. But as I said, the game has been out for at least 2-3 years, and I keep coming back to it. It's one that this is a game that I install to every device just so I have it there. And it's, like I said, it's great. And it's one of those, really straightforward concepts that, like I said, I think would be very conceptually straightforward to make accessible so that a blind audience could play it. So that will wrap that up here. But that is our first video in the Access Unlocked series. Hope you guys found it interesting or enjoyable. I know there really wasn't there wasn't any audio in this game because I turned it off for the purpose of the video and just in general. But if you know any developers or any blind developers, sighted or blind developers who might be able to kind of make this concept accessible, feel free to contact me or have them watch the video here, or contact me on Twitter at BGFH79, and we can kind of go through things in a little bit more detail. And this is the first video attempt at this concept, so I'm sure over time I will hopefully be able to explain things a little bit better. Once I'm done with this video, I'm probably going to record another one right away, just because I can immediately think of another game that is also on iOS that that would be really, really fun for blind users. And I think it also could be pretty easily made accessible. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. Follow me on Twitter at BGFH79. And until next time, I will talk to you guys later.